everyone, and welcome to another Scots Whay Hae podcast. And today I'm joined by poet, playwright, and now podcaster, Hannah Lavery. Hello, Hannah.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm really well. And we're here to talk about season 2 of the Quines Cast podcast, which now do you do with Caitlin Skinner? Is it the
Yeah,
two?
we kind of co-host, co-create it. And yeah, so we the idea came to us in kind of lockdown. We had like one of those long walks that people did, and what happens is I realized is when you have a long walk and a chat with Caitlin, suddenly little ideas you have become real. So that is kind of the way it sort of started. Yeah, so the two of us.
And what can you tell us about Quines Cast? What's the kind of philosophy behind it?
Well, I suppose essentially it was about creating space, a sort of intersectional feminist space for women to come together and talk about the things we don't often get asked to respond to, I suppose, both as artists, but also as part of one of the kind of the thread through the podcast is this discussion group that we've created with women from many different spheres, academia, social work, medicine, who we've invited to come in as well and to reflect upon the theme that we've chosen. And then we ask artists and musicians and playwrights to also respond to that theme. And it's just, I suppose, to create a space which isn't, I suppose, about argument, which is actually about listening and reflecting and sharing each other's wisdoms, and maybe a model for the conversations that in the middle of lockdown we were missing, perhaps me and Caitlin, but also just something that we felt that we wanted to put something into the world that felt considered, that felt that it was honoring women's voices and the kind of the multitudes that we are, and that would be at its heart a really welcoming and inclusive space. So I think that's the philosophy, if there is one behind it. Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things that podcasts kind of allow you to do is that you can make them as, in terms of time, as long as you like, which allows for conversation rather than the kind of older style thing, if it was radio or even television, of giving someone 5 minutes and cutting them off and then moving on to the next person. It kind of allows, hopefully, natural conversation to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, and I suppose in some ways, to be in the way that we've done the podcast, because we do them as live events, there is a sense of liveness to them. So there is probably a little meandering of me and Caitlin, because we come together after the live event and we sort of create sort of links and we respond again. So there is a bit of that meandering conversation, but the pieces are quite. What I like about them is that they're very the kind of provocation, the reflection that we start with, the play, the music, the poet that we often invite to come in, the discussion groups. There is a sense that they're really like making a very considered and thoughtful response to that. So there is the meandering, that beautiful thing about podcasts, the meandering conversation. There is definitely that in it, but there's also something of that liveness of a live event where people have come and they're taking their 10 minutes or 7 minutes to really say something that they really want to say, and they've really considered it. So this was the mix of both of those things, which I really enjoy.
And you mentioned there that there's themes to the podcast. Do you have the theme and then pick your guests saying, well, they'll have something interesting to think about that, or is it more natural than that?
I mean, yeah, there's definitely that. There's also sometimes just about who's available and like, oh, that would be really exciting. Sometimes it's about also asking someone who we think might say something interesting but doesn't often get asked to say something about it. So we're not trying to pick the most obvious always, but we are definitely taking a long time to think about who we ask, and looking at their work or looking at what they've said and thinking, what would they bring to that topic. But we tried really hard, and I think when we first did the first season, it felt a little bit scary, but we were like, well, actually, let's just say create a theme that's got that's wide enough that people will come from all different angles at it, and we won't tell them what to say. We'll just say, like when the first podcast we did, I think the first one was on city. We'll just say city, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And what's been amazing is you'll find these links that are like, that we find that actually there is something that people want to say about that, or there's something. But actually, what we've tried to do is to back off and just go, what happens if we just sort of put that in the room? Like, we want you, tell us about what loss means to you, or tell us what wild means to you, or tell us what change means to you. And then actually sometimes being really surprised about what's been said, because we have an expectation. Like, for example, with change, I had an expectation that it would all be about the menopause. I don't think anyone talked about it. I was like, oh, that's what I thought would happen. And so that's kind of feels like that's what we wanted to do together, which is like, what would happen if we let women take this, be the subject of the story, and just say what they want to say, and treat them, and actually create a space where people can be reflective and bring all their intelligence and all their wisdom into that conversation. What would, or that piece of art, or what would happen? And it's been lovely and exciting. And as we move into season 2, it just feels like it keeps building and becoming more and more. Well, actually, all of it's been really interesting. I think maybe me and Caitlin feel like we're actually getting, it takes a bit of a time to get the hang of it. We're actually starting to feel like, oh, this thing that we thought about on this walk on the beach is really working. It kind of, people want it. People are excited by it, and that's thrilling. That's absolutely thrilling.
And before we go on to look at season 2 coming, I think it'd be nice to know a little bit about your own background and Caitlin's background in terms of the arts and theatre in particular.
Well, I'll struggle to do a bio of Caitlin.
Okay.
Lisa, but she's an absolute wonder. She's the artistic director. I haven't got that title right, of Stella Quines. I'm sure it's probably a longer title that I've got wrong there. But she runs Stella Quines with others, and she's a director. And a really passionate about feminism, passionate about so many things, passionate about creating inclusive and democratic and collaborative spaces, and is just a really nice pal as well. I don't know if that's important to say, but yeah, she's brilliant. So she's and also the sort of person that you'd be careful about what you say you want to do when you walk along the beach with her. That would be like pretty clear. And I'm a poet and a playwright. I've tried my hand at directing a bit. I'm associate artist for the National Theatre of Scotland. But yeah, most of the time I'm just sitting on at my desk writing poems and writing plays, and so actually being able to do something like this podcast where I actually get to leave the house and be amongst other people is ridiculously exciting for me.
In case listeners are wondering and saying, why are you asking Hannah about Caitlin? Caitlin was supposed to join us originally,
Yeah.
so I do have some questions about both. So feel free to say it. Well,
yeah, no, poor Caitlin's poorly. So I wasn't. Yeah, exactly. I don't think I think hopefully I gave her a good enough bio, but I'm sure there's more that you should know.
I can note down on the post that accompanies it. So you talked about the themes, and you mentioned city was one of them. Can you tell us a bit about other themes that were in season 1, just so people have an idea?
Yeah, so in season 1, and if I hope they can remember all these right, we had change, we had city, we had wild, we had home. I think that was it. I might have missed one. And then we had at the end of the season, we had a discussion, because at the end we brought some of the artists that had been involved throughout the season to come together and to sort of reflect on the season as a whole and ask each other questions. There's a sort of a round table one at the end of the season. But yeah, home, city, wild, and change. Yeah, those. And for this season, do you want me to tell you about this season as well, or should we ask you a question? So for this season, we've just done our first one, which was on the theme of riot and activism, I suppose, which was absolutely glorious. And we had the wonderful poet Joelle Taylor. We had yes, I mean, it was an incredible night. And then what we've coming up next week at the being recorded live at the Traverse is on the theme of loss. And we have the wonderful novelist Catherine Simpson doing the provocation, and we've got this wonderful poet Catherine Wilson, and we'll always have a play, and we've got Rachel Samani doing the music as well. So I'm feeling terrible because I've lost my little paper that tells me all the different playwrights, but please, this is why I need Caitlin. So that one, and then after Loss, we're in Glasgow doing Pleasure, the theme of pleasure, and we have the wonderful Liz Lockhead, which I can't wait to hear what she says about pleasure. We have the musician Horse, and we have a play by Steph Smith, And we've also got a provocation or a reflection by Ruth Elliott, who is a sex educator that's going to come and talk. So that will be really interesting and really exciting, and I can really kind of and then we finish off our final one this season before we have a round table at the book festival, kind of talking about the whole season, is on education, and we're at Summerhall, which feels quite apt. And we have Val McDermott. We've got the wonderful poet, slam champion Angie Strachan, and then we're going to have an end of term disco afterwards at the Summer Hall as well. So yeah, so that's so those are the ones that we're doing. Those are all the live recordings, and then they'll come out as podcasts later in the year, which I'm not quite sure what date it is, but yeah, they'll come out later in the year. And then we'll have our round table discussion where we invite some of those people back that have been part of the podcast to come and talk about what it was like to be on it, what questions they have for each other at the book festival in Edinburgh. Yeah.
You may have mentioned it and it's just slipped to me when you said it, but what was the Glasgow venue? Just so I can try and make it.
Glasgow Women's Library. Sorry, I didn't say it. Yeah, Glasgow Women's Library. We're in Glasgow.
Fantastic. A great place, great space.
Yeah, no, I'm excited.
And so you say these are live and then they come out later on as podcasts. So first of all, I presume people can come along and join in and be in the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Be in the audience, and a lot of actually what was lovely about the one we've just done about Riot at the Traverse was just afterwards the conversation in the bar is just fantastic. But yeah, they definitely will capture the live audience and on the podcast, and it's really lovely I think it's lovely for the performers and the actors to have that sort of and for the listener to hear that sort of moment of liveness. And then what we do is we come back after it's done, and me and Caitlin will just sit and listen to it together and just sort of talk about some of the themes that have come up that we haven't really been able to talk about, in the moment of putting it on, because mostly we're just completely fangirling over the people that are on. So to have these lovely afterwards to actually really reflect on it, and also to be kind of like the listener, to be along with the listener and go, wow, that made me think about this, or that was really interesting, or that, this theme that, so we have those kind of little reflective links afterwards. And then all through the live things, we have threaded these little moments of the discussion groups that we've recorded. So there's like little snippets of that are also through the live events as well, that people seem to really enjoy and really respond to, which has been kind of really exciting to kind of be able to sit in a room together and to listen to these little bits of conversation is kind of, yeah, it's really interesting.
That's such a nice idea. I think about the live events I've been involved in, and you'd think, wouldn't it be lovely to talk more about it afterwards? Yes, you can in the bar, but often people have to go, but to kind of reflect on what's been said and to dig in a little bit deeper and have your own thoughts on what's been said or maybe what's not been said.
Yeah, and I think, the live events we don't, because of the way it's set up, we don't invite the audience to speak in that bit, but actually by having these moments afterwards where me and Caitlin talk about it, but also to have this discussion group that we can hear them talking and actually hear them going into, exactly like you said, into more depth, into more thinking about what this theme means to them. And and that's, yeah, I think it's really amazing just being in the space with all these people, just really, hearing that thinking happening and hearing that reflecting happening, and actually, yeah, and be able to sit afterwards and have those conversations, but also with the podcast being able to, we've had emails coming in and people kind of talking about what it meant, what it was like to listen to it. And so it has lots of these different lives. So which is like rare when you do live events. It's almost like it has a different life, as a podcast life, and it has so it's been a joy. I think that would be right and say, but maybe I'm the one that gets to do the joyous thing. There's lots of people that are working much harder for me, writing emails and organizing things. But yeah, for me, it's feeling really joyous. So yeah.
Because I first heard season 1 just purely as a podcast. I was aware once I'd listened to it that these were live, but if people just discover them as podcasts themselves, then, absolutely great, because they're still getting the full experience.
Oh, that's really kind of you to say, and that's what we really hoped. I suppose the first idea of it was as a podcast. That's where that was our first sort of passion for it, and then realizing that actually, why would we bring these people together and not invite an audience to come in? But it's definitely been all the thought about it is like, what would this be like to hear this? And I think, and maybe there was something about thinking about this in the lockdown where actually we were missing our friends, we're missing those moments of connection, and And actually, if we're honest, I still think that so many of us are missing,
Yeah.
and I think that's why podcasts are so popular, because it's like having a friend, isn't it? It's like being able to join in, and they mean so much to people. So I think we wanted to sort of offer some more voices into that, and it felt important to do that. And it felt important to do that with, with having predominantly kind of Scottish artists and Scottish women talking about what it is to live a life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's often, I think, like going for a walk with a friend, as you said at the beginning with Caitlin, this is how you came up with the idea. Often with your favorite podcast, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, and it really feels like that. I'm definitely become, I mean, I was always quite passionate about podcasts, but there's definitely ones that I can't wait for the next week. I'm really looking forward to having, like you said, having that little walk, or like, just being able to have a bit of quiet moment where you can just allow yourself to think about something and to be completely, um, really invited in, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
an invitation in, like come and hang out with me. And I think so hopefully that's what we've created for people.
No, absolutely. And I'm thinking of the makeup. Do you have this idea that you always have a bit of theatre, if I'm right? That's
Yeah,
kind of
there's
things.
always a play. Yeah.
And then poetry, music. I mean, Catherine Simpson's written in various kind of styles. So, I mean, how do you,
Well,
is it structured as that, or you've got your play that you're always going to have because you're linked to Stella Quines Theatre Company, but aside from
yeah,
that,
I mean, I think the play, to be honest, I think we came up with this idea before we'd even really thought Stella Quines, which is like, actually, it was always the idea that a piece of drama felt really
right,
important to be central.
okay,
But it was, I think the way we thought about it was we thought we would begin by offering a writer or an academic or any thinker really that says, to be like, here, would you like to reflect upon this and write and commission? We commissioned someone to write something new. So, and actually a lot of them have been novelists, but we've had lots of different, as well, and just be like, so we have that opening reflection, and then we invite a musician to respond, and then we invite a poet or a writer. We've had writers as well to respond to the theme. And sometimes the writers will come, most of the things that they've already written that they'll just fit, that they know will fit this theme, or that feels that it would speak to the theme. And then we commission a new play as well. So we commission a new play, and then, yeah, so everyone's responding, but we do always have that structure. It's reflection, musician, play, poet or writer, and then we end with a longer set for the musician. So there is when we're trying to, put it all together, there's like little boxes that we're having to fill, like we know that. And then I think that feels really nice for the listener. There's always a sense that whatever the theme is, there is a pattern of the kind of listening, though this is the way you follow this thread through. So but yeah, and it's like you said, when I said earlier, it's probably asking the most extraordinary, interesting people that we know to come and say something. And actually, I think of all the people on this season and last season, they could talk on any of these subjects really. But and sometimes we'll pick particularly because they've said something really interesting about the topic, or that or the theme that we're exploring.
it reminded me in a way of the kind of old school arts programs that you don't get on television anymore. You'll get a kind of round panel discussion, then you'll get a bit of music, and then maybe a bit of theatre, a real mix up of things, but it's all surrounded by a discussion as well.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think it definitely feels like it's there's definitely nods from things that I remember, like almost that kind of salon feeling as well, that we're all coming in and everyone doing their turn. And but yeah, I think there's definitely about, I think the real drive of it is, what would these people say about this? What, and I think, like, particularly this, the topics we've chosen this season, when I think about them, they're so relevant to the world we're in, like riot and protest and activism. It's something that's such under threat, something that really occupies people. So to ask a group of artists and a group of women who have got such experience in different fields, to say, explore that, go explore that for me. What comes up for you when you hear the word riot? What does that mean for us today? What does it mean if we've become too tolerant? And why don't we riot? And why are we protesting? And why, to actually, so it feels really important. And the same with loss. I mean, we are in this huge experience, moment of collective grief. We still haven't unpacked what so many of us went through the COVID and pandemic. So to have these women and these kind of just to come and have an opportunity to reflect upon that and talk about. And there's some beautiful moments. I've just been listening to the loss discussion again, and the discussion group, they really talk about what it is to survive loss and how what we can find from that and how we and so there's real wisdom there for people, and I think there's stuff that can really support people in those moments. And then of course, lifelong learning, we're doing all this stuff about AI. I mean, we're really in this moment of go, what does it mean? What does education mean? What is it useful for? What does so we're choosing topics or choosing themes which are really that feel really relevant and feel like they're really on the edge of what we're thinking about, and then inviting these incredible women and non-binary people to come and just really respond to that, to really be like have the freedom to say whatever it is that they want to say about this. And it's really exciting, I think, and potentially just like can be completely off what we thought that they were going to say, which is also really great.
Well,
So,
I was going to say the themes, because they are relevant to everyone to some extent.
absolutely.
Everyone will have, like you said about what you thought change might be about, everyone will have their own idea. You can't help it as soon as you mention it about, oh yeah, they're definitely going to talk about this, or I would have talked about this, or whatever. And just to hear different reactions forces you to kind of think in a different way as well.
Well, yeah,
Why
and if
did people
yeah.
choose that? Why did they choose that?
And also, if you remember, I don't know if you've heard the Change one from the season, but the Change one just came immediately after, like a week or two after the Queen died. So suddenly, we had two public agents like, oh, change. Well, this is a big change when it just became about the Queen. And I remember going, I don't think I would have ever guessed that this podcast would actually be about the kind of what do we think about the monarchy and what do we think about this. But so that's also the especially with the reflections where they're kind of being written kind of in the moment of the like they're written very soon before the event, they can just really shift on whatever is happening in the world. So that it is right, absolutely right. What's gonna, the pleasure one really interests me, like where, obviously we've asked to kind of someone to come as a sex educator that helps and talk about sex and pleasure and women, and it's something that obviously women don't necessarily talk about very freely. So actually that's quite exciting. So we kind of have an inkling of what Ruth might talk about, but in terms of the way Liz Loghead might take that, I mean, who knows, or Steph, or and so it becomes really kind of slightly dangerous, a little bit like what's going to happen here, what can the night hold, and also just like what incredible insight are we going to be given, like where there's so much of that which sitting in the audience or listening back to it, in me and Caitlin's role, it's just always like, wow, I would have like never like you've taken me on a journey or made me think about something or thinking about it a different way that and like little lines, like Denise Mina opened up our first ever one in the city, and she wrote this incredible little story that she shared as her reflection. And one of the things she said in that, which feels to me is probably sums up the whole of the work of the podcast in some way, is that she said about being the subject of my own story, about being a woman and being the subject of my own story. And I thought, well, actually maybe this is what this is. It's about saying these are the themes that are affecting it, but we want you to be what does that, how does that affect you, and you be the subject of the story, you be the teller, you be the intellectual, you be, we want you. So that feels really important. Yeah. And I should also say, when all the audiences, there's lots of men in those audiences as well, so it's very open for everyone to come along. But yeah,
And what did you learn from season one? Was there anything after it was finished and you reflected on it, you thought, well, that's interesting, we should do more of that, or maybe that didn't work? Was there any kind of lessons learned?
but there was a lot of me and Caitlin realizing the things that we repeat quite a lot. Like I think I said resonate a lot and lovely. And I didn't realize, so there was a lot of me like cringing. Listen, I'm sure you feel the same when you go back.
Oh,
Go,
absolutely.
what?
You
Did I
said it
say
there,
that a lot?
absolutely. The amount of times I say absolutely, but yes.
So there was a lot of, I realized that what I had to do was like really like I wrote a big notepad like don't say resonate, or like have almost like a thesaurus, like different words that you can say apart from wow, that was wonderful, that really resonated with me. So yeah, there was little moments, and I definitely think as the podcast went on, me and Caitlin just found a much of an ease about like being less hosts and more fellow listeners with the work that we listen to. So there was loads of that little kind of moments of and yeah, whenever you run a live event, every time it's like you walk away going, oh, that's how we should have done that, or like we should have introduced this way, or we should have, but in terms of the model and the artists that we've invited in, and the people that are contributing in the discussion group, I mean, I feel like I was it's just been so extraordinary and so wonderful. So I think the lessons that have definitely been learned about more about what I repeat and what I say and in the way in which the other one I realized is that I had the microphone and I laughed all the way down the microphone. So it was a horrible editing process. I'm like, you need to take my laugh out. You need to take my laugh out. So there's little things that you learn like that. But yeah, and I think we're always sort of, like, me and Caitlin will afterwards have a little debrief about what went right, or like how we can. So yeah, we're always sort of adding and thinking about how to make the experience richer and fuller for everyone. So but yeah, touch wood, so far it's been great. So,
It's such a different thing to writing, because you know better than me. If you say something superb and then you think, well, I can't use superb again, and it's easy to go, well, I just won't, I'll find an alternative. But when you're speaking and thinking, sometimes that's what comes through.
also, don't you realize that your vocabulary is much more limited than you thought it was? That's the one I was like, oh my, and you'd be listening to all these really articulate people speaking, and then I was coming by with going, oh, I should really get better. So yeah, I've definitely been reading more of the dictionary, and like just challenging myself a little bit to have more words than wonderful and wow, and that was fantastic. But let's see if it happens or not. It's fun.
So this next question was mainly going to be for Caitlin, so feel free to say it's not for me, but it is 30 years of Stella Quines this year, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, I
It's
think,
fantastic for
yeah.
any company to be going for that length of time. And I really wanted to, well, I won't ask you to give a kind of history of it, but do you think in those 30 years, that there has been greater equality in the arts in general, or is it still a long way from that?
I mean, I think this is a really good question for Caitlin. I think Caitlin's done a lot of work in this. I know Stella Quines have done as well. And I think there's a lot of issues about whether the sector is safe or fair, or what could be done to make it the access and equality or equity. I think there's still work to be done with that. But yeah, I definitely think Stella Quines stands as a real beacon of of what it is to create a space in a company which celebrates and supports women to tell their stories. So yeah, but I mean, I know that Caitlin can speak about this beautifully, and I also know that you can get a really cool badge if you join as a maybe a member or a fellow or a supporter
You
of Stella
can, if
Quines.
you go over to Stella Quines' website, you can support Quines Cast as well, but you can support Stella Quines, and there's all
Absolutely. And they really need, I mean, I think that, the support is really needed, and the badge is really cool. I really want one. So yeah, but yeah, I think, yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled to be working with Stella Quines. It's like, it feels such a, I think as a playwright and as an artist, it feels really, a real welcoming home to, and a really lovely, validation of your work when you get asked to by Stella Quines, and I think that feels like that for many people.
It's one of those arts companies that when the name comes up, people just go, "Oh, they do great work." There's a real warmth and a real a love for what they do, and the way that they do it. I think equally as important.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's and that's a testament to so many people that have worked for them. Yeah.
So this might be too soon to say, but are you even thinking about a season 3 for Quines Cast?
Oh, I have a little book where I keep writing down people's names and writing ideas down. But again, I imagine that's a question that Caitlin will be a more position to answer. I would love to keep doing it. I think there's so many things that I want to hear hear people talking about. So and it is a real joy to make, and it's a real joy to do, and I feel really lucky to be able to sort of invite these wonderful people onto the stage, and to kind of create this sort of, hopefully, this lovely listening experience that people will kind of, look forward to hearing. So yeah, but who knows, Alistair? Who knows?
Well, I mean, the themes, that you could keep doing different themes for as long as you like, and you've got such great people involved as well that, yeah, I certainly hope to be a season 3.
Oh, thank you.
Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. All the best with season 2. We'll put out all the details of how people can listen in and attend the live gigs as well, because they sound fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. What a pleasure to talk to you, Alistair.
And we'll be back soon with someone completely different.